Between 1820 and 1845, Tennessee, Kentucky, and other southern states were a jumping-off place for immigrants from the United States to the province of Texas. In that region, somebody often left town on his way to Texas, and when his absence was questioned, he was said to have gone to Texas. Frequently, they would merely paint the letters GTT on the side of their home to indicate their intentions. Some of the immigrants were running from the lawman or the taxman, but most were pioneers looking to make a fresh start. Such was the case with two of our predecessors, Shelby Corzine and Richard Alderson. Shelby Corzine, Estebuler's great-grandfather, is a person of note in our family tree. He was a land surveyor, a senator, a lawyer, a judge, and a founding member of the Republic of Texas's judiciary. Here's his story. Shelby Corzine was born in North Carolina in 1793. At the age of 20, Shelby met and married Sarah Kennard, and together they settled in Alabama, where they raised 9 children and he practiced law. In addition to being a lawyer, Shelby was also a land surveyor, a profession that was in high demand in the province of Texas that was then a part of Mexico. People wishing to settle in Texas had to bring with them certificates of good citizenship. The governor of Alabama provided Shelby with this recommendation: M. Shelby Corzine, the bearer herewith, intending to visit the province of Texas and probably to remove there with his family, I take pleasure in stating that I have been acquainted many years with M. Corzine, and that he is a gentleman of unimpeachable character, and that he has always sustained the reputation of an amiable and highly worthy citizen. I commend him to the friendship and civilities of the good people of the province of Texas, as that he would be a most useful and valuable citizen. Signed, John Gale, Governor of Alabama, 20th of November, 1834. In February of 1835, Shelby and Sarah packed up their family and came to Texas through Galveston, finally settling in San Augustine, in the southeastern portion of the territory. The Mexican government awarded Shelby 3,200 acres of land for his service as a surveyor. Due to numerous oppressive policies implemented by the Mexican government, Texians decided to declare their independence from Mexico in early 1836 and form their own republic. The battle for independence had begun. After the massacre at the Alamo in March of '36, Sam Houston ordered the settlers to retreat from Mexican General Santa Anna's approaching army. Fearing imminent capture, civilians left their homes, taking only what they could carry in what became known as the Runaway Scrape. Heavy rains, lack of food, and sickness made the journey very difficult. The Corzines were part of that exodus from San Augustine, eastward towards the relative safety of the Sabine River. It wasn't until Houston's defeat of Santa Anna at the Battle of San Jacinto in April that the Corzines and other settlers were able to return to their homes. As a lawyer, Shelby Corzine was quickly elected senator in the newly formed Republic of Texas. However, he soon resigned that office to accept the position of the judge of the 1st Judicial District in the southeast portion of the fledgling country. This made him an Associate Justice of the First Supreme Court of the Republic. Shelby presided over a famous treason trial following an uprising in 1838, and even granted Sam Houston a divorce from his Indian wife. He also headed the commission that formed the boundary between the Republic of Texas and the United States. Shelby's oldest son, Herschel, was quite an interesting character. Nanny writes of a convoluted set of circumstances that caused him to miss the Battle of the Alamo. If he had been there, he would have undoubtedly been killed with the rest of the Texians. He also participated in the storming and capture of San Antonio in 1835, as well as the pivotal Battle of San Jacinto in 1836 that ultimately won the war. Family tradition holds that Herschel was given Santa Anna himself's horse and saddle after the general's surrender. Other records indicate he may have won them in a poker game. Herschel was killed by his wife's lover outside his home in 1840. Shelby Corzine died suddenly of unknown causes on the morning of February 8, 1839, at the age of 45, and was buried in St. Augustine. Unfortunately, the location of his grave is not known. The Telegraph and Texas Register ran the following death notice: died in San Augustine on the 8th of February, the Honorable Shelby Corzine, judge of the district court embracing the Eastern District of Texas, and has filled several important stations in the country, he has left a family and numerous friends to deplore his loss. Both Shelby and his son Herschel were given a number of large land patents in Texas for their service to Mexico and the Republic of Texas. However, after their untimely deaths, the family was unable to translate that land into any wealth. Samuel Shelby Corzine, Nanny's grandfather, is said to have lost part of the family land in poker games. Shelby's widow Sarah struggled to raise her large family in San Augustine, and at one point, she was forced to take in boarders to keep bread on the table. Shelby Corzine was a highly respected member of his community and played a pivotal role in the formation of the Republic of Texas. His premature death at the age of 45 cut short a distinguished career during a very interesting period of Texas history. Richard Alderson, who went by Dick, was Big Dad's grandfather, and he was also looking for a fresh start in Texas. It was the spring of 1842 when Dick, an 18-year-old bachelor from Bowling Green, Kentucky, watched with interest as a new colony was being formed in the Republic of Texas. The Texians had just won their independence from Mexico 6 years earlier at the Battle of San Jacinto, and were looking for honest, hard-working people from states like Kentucky, Tennessee, and Missouri, among others, to come and settle the land. Peter's Colony was a huge piece of land in North Texas, stretching from the Red River on its northern border all the way to Dallas in the southeast and Wichita Falls in the west. The founders of Peter's Colony were called impresarios and advertised in newspapers with ads that read, "Bring your family to Texas, establish a farm or ranch, stay for at least 3 years, and get free land." A married man could receive 640 acres, and a single man over 17 could get 320 acres if he stayed and worked the land for 3 years. That sounded very promising to young Dick Alderson. He came from a large family back in Kentucky with numerous brothers, so the thought of starting his own farm in Texas was very appealing. So in the summer of 1842, Dick decided to join a group of 26 families, more than 100 people, led by Parson John Nelms, a Methodist minister, going to this new colony called the Republic of Texas. The families traveled overland from Russellville, Kentucky to Clarksville, Tennessee, and boarded a river steamer named the Embassy. They sailed on the Embassy on the Cumberland River, which took them down the Ohio and the Mississippi to New Orleans. There they purchased supplies for a year and ascended the Mississippi to the Red River, up to Shreveport. From there, they proceeded to Jefferson, Texas, by way of Soda Lake, and warehoused their year's provisions there. The families first set foot on the Republic of Texas soil at Swanson's Landing. The families then proceeded to Dallas and eventually settled on the banks of White Rock Creek in what is now Plano, Texas, in southwest Collin County. Most of the trip was made by the steamer Embassy, but the last leg of their journey had to be made by covered wagon. When traveling by land, they could only travel about 22 miles a day. When Dick and the Nelms clan arrived at White Rock Creek, at first they thought it to be an ideal place to stake their claim. They first lived in tents close to the creek, then erected log cabins as more permanent housing. However, their fortunes soon began to decline. Parson Nelms sent someone from their original party of 26 families to Jefferson to collect their year's worth of provisions. However, the man came back empty-handed, saying that the warehouse fees exceeded the worth of the supplies. The man subsequently showed more wealth than he had previously and was suspected of stealing their valuable provisions. Without their needed supplies, the men went out on the surrounding countryside to hunt buffalo and deer to provide food for their families. Then another tragedy struck the small settlement when several of their group caught a fever and died. These beloved family members, mostly women and infant children, were buried on the banks of the White Rock Creek. Within 4 months, they abandoned the settlement. Dick Alderson and a handful of others decided to return to Kentucky. Parson Nelms, however, and his extended family moved to a prairie land near Bonham on Caney Creek in Fannin County late in 1842. Bonham was not part of Peter's Colony, so they were giving up their dream of a farm or ranch and became townfolk instead. Parson worked with his sons making shoes, boots, and later saddles, in addition to being a Methodist minister there in Bonham. As an 18-year-old bachelor, Dick Alderson had a very good reason to return to Kentucky. When he had arrived in Texas, he found that there were almost no eligible young ladies to marry. So he traveled back to Kentucky to find a wife. Parson Nelms had been singing the praises of one of his daughters, Mary Ann, who had stayed behind in Kentucky. So sure enough, upon his return to Kentucky, Dick courted Mary Ann Nelms, who was 6 years his senior, and they were married on December 16, 1845, in Todd County, Kentucky. Together, they made the arduous trip back to Texas and settled in Bonham near his new in-laws. In October of 1849, they welcomed their first child and named her Fairy Ann Zena, whom they called Fanny. 5 more children followed. Richard Bowling Alderson was child number 4 and later became Big Dad's father. On the Bonham census of 1850, Dick listed his occupation as carpenter. A few years later, Dick opened a store that sold gingerbread. Years later, it became known as Alderson's Bakery Shop, and the townfolk called him Papa Dick. His bakery shop was on the northeast corner of the square, across the street from the courthouse. The streets of Bonham were unpaved until 1926 and became a sea of mud whenever it rained, doing serious damage to the buggies and wagons of the area. Dick didn't give up his dream, however, of owning a farm. In the mid-1850s, we find 2 applications on file for land in the Peters Colony, but no record that he ever became a Peters colonist. Then the Civil War began on April 12, 1861, when the first shot was fired on Fort Sumter, South Carolina. Dick Alderson quickly enlisted in the Confederate Army on July 6, 1861. At the age of 38, he was one of the oldest volunteers, and he was joined by many men from Bonham, and they became known as the Caney Creek Boys of the 34th Texas. They expected to win the war by Christmas. However, the war obviously dragged on for 4 long years. Within a year of enlisting, Dick contracted tuberculosis and returned home to Bonham in 1862. In 1864, Dick traveled to San Antonio in search of a better climate for his health. However, he was unable to find any more suitable location, so returned to Bonham, where he lived out the rest of his life. Early in 1865, a Confederate soldier named Charles Bellows arrived at the Alderson's Bakery Shop, delirious with malaria. Dick, seeing that he was very ill, made a pallet for him in back of the shop and later took him into his home. Charles was nursed back to health by Fanny, Dick's 16-year-old daughter, and Charles and Fanny fell in love during his convalescence, and later they were married. Dick Alderson was only 41 when he died of tuberculosis in April of 1865 at his home in Bonham, surrounded by his wife and family. There was a huge procession of townspeople who followed behind his funeral wagon. He was probably buried in Pace Cemetery in Bonham. However, there is no definitive record of his final resting place. Papa Dick Alderson led a fruitful life, well loved by his family and friends. He was survived by his wife Mary Ann and their 6 children. Richard Bowling Alderson, the 4th child, married Virginia Bell, and they had 3 children, Roy, Ruby, and Irving Thomas, or Big Dad, who were all born in Bonham. Big Dad moved to Fort Worth in his late teens and attended business school, where he met and married Esther Beulah Humphreys, whom their grandchildren called Nanny. Esther Beulah Humphreys was the daughter of John Locke Humphreys and Cleo Corzine, the granddaughter of Shelby Corzine. While Big Dad was born in Texas, his work took him and his family to Missouri for much of his adult life. In his later years, however, he returned to his Texas roots and is even buried in Bonham. Check out photos of his life while you're here at the reunion.